Hello and welcome to Own Your Health with me, Katie Brindle, wellness expert you need to know and healer to the stars. So in today's episode, we are talking about sinusitis, one of those awful conditions which affects hundreds of thousands of people. There are some people who get sinusitis just regularly all the time, and many other people that just seem to get it at the end of colds and then they can't quite shift it. So we're going to be talking about that today. But before we get into that, let's talk about some really lovely comments that we've had back from some of our lovely listeners and viewers. So Joe says, wow, I'm going to remember to do your thumb holding technique, as I was a thumb sucker for years and have always been a bit of a worrier. So for those that didn't see this massive viral that we've had recently, it's a really simple technique, whereas if you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, you just take your thumb and you hold it with the other hand. Super simple, and it's really, really effective. And it is actually why small children suck their thumbs, because it's incredibly nurturing and comforting to the body to have the thumb held. So it's something that I do a lot if I'm in nervous situations. I'll have my hands sort of neatly clasped on my lap, and yet actually what I'm actually doing is holding my thumb. Really useful technique. So do please share that with everyone. Indeed, do share everything you hear on this podcast with everyone. And indeed, if you are on Apple or Spotify, share it with your friends and family. Tell everyone the exciting news that there's this cool podcast. Now, Lorraine says, Katie, she loves this tip on thumb holding as well. And she loves my yellow hoodie onesie. Can I kindly share where it's from? It's actually from the Folie Douce, which is in Chamonix. I went there a few years ago on a ski trip, and in the Folie Douce, I've got a gift shop, and I saw it. I thought, okay, that's actually kind of naff, but actually I really like it, and it kind of weirdly suited me. And my kids egged me on, went, Mummy, get it. And actually, I have to say, although it was one of those purchases that you think, am I actually going to wear this? I actually do, and I film in it loads as well, and it's super comfortable. So that yellow onesie has actually done quite well. I don't know if they still sell it, but it's from the Folie Douce shop anyway. So there we go. I'd like to talk to you about our two wonderful sponsors, because we don't take on anybody, we're very picky here. So the first sponsor is the Naked Pharmacy. Now, the reason we love working with them so much is because on this podcast, we cover a wide range of health advice. I mean, from any given week, I'm going to be talking to you anything from shingles to sinusitis to eating chia seed rye bread in order to get good bowel movements in autumn, to decluttering, to a myriad of different things. And you need a partner that can kind of run with you at the same time. And the Naked Pharmacy is just that, because they have supplements for everything, which means whatever topic we're talking about, you can pop over to the Naked Pharmacy and they will have supplements to support this information. Now, not only that, they are very content rich. They have an actual pharmacy, which is what's so great. So just as we as a brand here on Own Your Health are very keen to answer all your questions and to keep the dialogue going with you, to offer the advice as much as just products themselves, the Naked Pharmacy are the same. So they have the products to match the content, but they also have the expertise as well. Now, they cover anything from stress to sleep to mood to energy to gut health to weight management, and pretty much everything else besides. So they're also going to give you the support as well. And they're offering us a 20% discount. If you use KT20 at checkout, which is at thenakedpharmacy.com, and you pop in KT20 at checkout, you will get a 20% discount. So we're really picky about who we partner with, because I want to make sure that when I'm partnering and promoting something here to you, my audience, that I endorse it wholeheartedly, and I genuinely think it's in your interest to know about it. So let's talk about Meda. Now, Meda Skincare was set up in 2009 by Dr. Tina Meda, and the reason I love this brand so much is because it's really very much focused on finding holistic and natural solutions to your skincare. And she has a few really cool, iconic products. The first one, which is the one that she started with, which is this probiotic exfoliating Enzy peel mask. What it does is it works in conjunction with the microbiome on your skin. Now, this is really important because most of my audience is sort of 40 plus. So anyone that's 40 plus is likely to have put chemicals on their skin over the years, because that was the skincare that we were sort of introduced to in the bad old days of the 20th century. Now, that's not great, because when you strip the microbiome off your skin, what happens is then that gets replaced by a whole load of chemicals. And that's not great, because basically everything's stripped off and chemical dependent. So what happens with this Enzy peel mask is that it basically supports the health and diversity of your skin's beneficial bacteria. Now, this is important because I'm talking to you about this in the autumn. And autumn is very much a time of the metal element, which is to do with your lungs and your large intestine and the immune system. And microbiome, which sits on the surface of the skin and is not to be stripped off, has a direct relationship with the lungs because the skin is the second lung. And the lungs, in turn, have the secondary organ of the large intestine, which is where vast quantities of this microbiome are hosted within the body. And this is all the good bacteria. This is all the good stuff. So we really don't want to be stripping this stuff out. So Meda has a brilliant quiz which will help you establish exactly what it is that you need to be adding to your skincare routine. But the hero product that she launched with back in 2009, which sort of got her into the public space, is very much this NZ peel mask, which is probably the thing that I use the most, and I really, really enjoy using, and you can really feel it sort of working into the skin. So a brilliant, brilliant brand. I really, really endorse this brand. I think it works very much as regular skincare, but also treatment skincare as well. And I'm all in favour of regulating the biome back into your skin if you've been using chemicals. Back to today's episode, which is all about sinusitis. Now, sinusitis is really uncomfortable. I don't really need to go into the whole Western thing about it because anyone suffering from it is likely to know what the Western diagnosis is. Let's talk about the stuff that we don't know, which is the Eastern diagnosis and what you're supposed to do about it. Now, the reason why I like to go at things from the Eastern perspective, aside from the fact it's my qualification, so I'm qualified to discuss it, is that we just talk about the body in a completely different way, which means it works very nicely alongside everything that you already know. Now, the thing about sinusitis is it's all about the relationship with phlegm, okay? Because what is it? It's mucus, and it's mucus that gets clogged up in the sinuses, and then everything gets blocked, and then you can't breathe properly, and you get headaches, and you get eye pains, and you get blocked nose, and it's really uncomfortable, and you just feel like your head's going to explode. Now, the thing in Chinese medicine about phlegm is that there's two organs which are involved, okay? The first is the spleen. Now, the spleen, its dominant responsibility in the body is the management of the transportation and transformation of food and fluids around the body. That's its number one thing it has to do. Now, when the spleen is overwhelmed, which it will be, because the spleen is also very much an organ that gets impacted by irregular lifestyle, by anger and frustration, because if the liver, which responds to anger and frustration, the liver controls the spleen. So if the liver's getting wound up, then it's kind of like the spleen becomes the punching bag for the liver. So the liver goes like this, and the spleen's like, oh, it's like Punch and Judy. Okay, so the spleen's like, oh, like this. So it's getting bashed up by the liver. It's also getting bashed up by likely irregular eating habits, lifestyle habits. The spleen is the earth element of the body, and the earth likes to move in a circle, doing the same thing at the same time every day. It just likes to kind of go in this lovely rotation. It likes the same amount of food. It likes to eat at the same time. It likes similar portion sizes. It likes to know what it's doing. It wants to feel grounded. Okay, now that is a far cry removed from the reality of what's going on in modern life, because what's happening is we eat erratically. Our lifestyles are erratic. Our diaries are erratic. We're often flying around here, there and everywhere, driving here, driving there. No 2 days the same. So your poor earth element literally is kind of spinning on its own axis. And then we're not eating the right foods. Even if you are having a really healthy lifestyle in the West, I can assure you by Eastern standards, you are not. Okay, you're not. Even the best, most health conscious person in the West, if you compare them to the best health conscious person from 200 years ago in the East, never mind 2,000 years ago, I can assure you, you're not. Our food our food's called organic, which in the olden days was just food. And even then, organic doesn't necessarily mean organic. It's all a bit of a muddle. Not to mention the other major culprit that the spleen absolutely can't stand is cold. It does not like cold food. And most people I know eat food straight out the fridge, straight out the chiller cabinets, or they're putting ice in their drinks. It's a disaster, okay? So there's a lot of stuff going on that means that the spleen's responsibility of the transformation and transportation of food and fluid around the body is being compromised. Okay, now what happens when you're eating the wrong foods and living the wrong lifestyle? And that's all fine because we can address all of this. You need to know the techniques, what to do. But the problem is that what happens is the spleen then gets damp. It's an organ that's prone to damp. And the thing is, because it's responsible for this transformation of food and fluids around the body, it then gets damp and it doesn't transform. Then what happens is you start to create phlegm. That's what starts to get created in the body. Now, then what happens is the spleen doesn't store phlegm. The phlegm has a little journey that it needs to make, because the spleen in this instance has a direct relationship with the lungs. And the lungs in Chinese medicine are called the storehouse of phlegm. Sounds a bit gross, and indeed it is. And this is where you will start to understand phlegm and mucus, because if anyone's ever had a cold, which will be everybody listening, you will find that your lungs will get clogged up with phlegm and you will cough it out. And you look at it and you can see it. It's got colour, it's got odour, it's got texture, and you're trying to expectorate. Now, the spleen will be dumping this phlegm. Basically, it will be using the lung to release this phlegm to get it out of its own kind of mandate. It's kind of like dumping its workload onto another organ, because it's still trying to cope. Because remember, it's earth. So it's working on its cycle, knowing that there's going to be more food to transport and transform. And also your spleen has other responsibilities, like your immune system, like your muscles, like worrying, like trusting, like all sorts of other things it's got to do. Not to mention, it's likely to be getting bashed up regularly by its controlling partner, your angry liver, that's basically trying to kind of cope with the onslaught of everything you're doing on a daily basis. So your spleen is only too happy to dump all this phlegm into your lung. Now, this is a bit of an energetic relationship, okay, because all those from a Western perspective are going, well, it's not physically dumping actual phlegm. No, it's not. It's an energy composition which then starts to get compressed and then forms and becomes matter. And the most important thing you need to know is at this point, it's now moved from the orifice of the empire of the spleen into the empire of the lung. And this is where the sinusitis starts to come in, because what's happening now? Now you've got phlegm in the lungs. So what does the body do? Well, the nose in Chinese medicine is the exterior organ of the lung. So the lung opens to the nose. So the lung knows this. Okay, the lung has a massive relationship with the nose, the back of the mouth, the kind of the breathing, the breath in, the breath out. And so what happens is when all this excess damp and phlegm starts forming in the lung goes, right, well, we need to get rid of that, because if that gets infected, then we're going to have a problem. So we need to expectorate, we need to get rid of it. So I know, let's shove it up into the sinuses, because the sinuses are like these kind of like mini exterior storehouses of this stuff before it then goes out through the nose or potentially out through the coughing mechanism. But the lung ultimately wants to use the nose first, because the nose is its primary organ. So it's going to use the nose to release. So this episode is brought to you by a superb brand, which I'm so excited to talk to you about. Now, remember, all of the brands that we talk about in the advertising space in Own Your Health are always brands that I want you to know about because I think they're good. And Liminal is no exception to this. Now, Liminal is founded by a friend of mine and a friend of the podcast, Rebecca Brown. Now, Rebecca Brown started life as a narrative researcher, and you're thinking, what on earth is that? And the clue is interesting into the creation of Liminal that came out of the back of it. So she spent her entire professional career before this listening to people's stories. And she started to work into the menopause time before the menopause sort of became the huge great topic that it is now. So consequently, she was building up this huge great research bank of other people's stories, which then coincided with her own journey going into the perimenopause, where slightly her professional world started to fall apart due to the perimenopausal symptoms. Now, as a result of her own personal story and also being a narrative researcher, she started to experiment, as we all do. She started to ask herself, what if I ... So she started to formulate all sorts of different formulations using all sorts of different herbal decoctions in order to create the brand that is now called Liminal. And the answer to this is that she's created not just a superb range of powders and supplements, which are very complex powders with multi ingredients all combined into them, apparently extraordinarily difficult to formulate. But in this community, there is also very much a community-based energy frequency of the sharing of knowledge, the sharing of stories, the sharing of understanding that when you're going through your menopausal symptoms, not only do you need physical and biological support, but you also need emotional and spiritual support as well. Now, this is something that is key to the heart of the Liminal brand. So over there is the most amazing community of men and women who are discussing all sorts of treatment modalities which have worked for them or their partners. So Liminal is a brand that I would very much encourage you to pop over to the website. So that is our wonderful sponsor and friend of the podcast today. And now we shall go back into the rest of the podcast. And remember, what we're talking about here is a journey of energy compressing itself into lightweight matter before it gets compressed into heavyweight matter. And when we're dealing with sinusitis, it's lightweight matter. It's turbid, but it's not as turbid as complete expectorating cough phlegm, which is going to be like hacked out through the esophagus and out through the mouth. It's before that. Okay, it hasn't then yet reached the and then some bit. It's the body trying to kind of deal with the kind of the middle weight before it happens. So basically the body is kind of raising, the lungs are rising it up and like dumping it into the sinuses, ready for it to come out through the nose, where you will then blow your nose and release it. But the problem is there's too much of it, because if your lifestyle is imbalanced and there's yet more turbulence in your daily diary management, your liver's still stressed, your spleen is still getting the wrong foods, it's still kind of like orbiting and kind of going more like this, there's more and more and more. And the problem is you can't clear it fast enough. And then, of course, it backs up. And then, of course, as we know from anyone listening to one of my first episodes, the 3 key reasons why you get sick. Number 1, the free flow of qi and blood around the body. If that gets compromised, you will get symptoms. And this is a prime example, because it's getting blocked. And at that point, the number 2 comes in, purge and nourish. The body can't purge correctly. It's overwhelmed. There's too much of it. So then it starts to get infected. And then you start to get all the symptoms, and then in come the problems. So what do? Well, what we've got to do is support the body in its natural mechanisms. We've got to support the free flow of qi and blood by clearing the purge and nourish mechanism. We've got to support the body as it purges out. We've got to clear the decks. So in today's episode, we're very excited to be partnering with Nature's Answer. Now, Nature's Answer is a brilliant wellness brand, which I'm very excited to talk about, because they have hundreds and hundreds of formulations, and they don't just offer them as capsules. Now, I find not everybody likes taking powder-based, capsule-based supplements. Some people can't cope with them. Some people are already taking quite a number of them. So I always think it's quite useful to take supplements in different shapes and guises, because it helps you sort of cross-reference against different things, because many of us wish to take various different things for various different reasons. So Nature's Answer, they use gummies, they use droppers, they use all the different variations of how to get these supplements into your body. So I find that very useful. And they also, clues in the name, pretty much have the answer to pretty much everything. But today I want to talk particularly about a particularly useful, sorry, I'm going to say that again, I've said that twice. But today I want to talk about a particular supplement that they offer, which is called UT Answer. UT standing for urinary tract. Now, urinary tract infections are one of the major causes of misery, and it comes in my clinic a lot. And often people refer to antibiotics as a solution. That's absolutely fine. But many people then struggle with the solution because they have to find themselves taking repeated antibiotics because the problem never quite goes away. What Nature's Answer are using here is a very interesting 3-day regimen to help clear up urinary tract infections. Now, this can be a particularly useful thing if it's a recurring problem, which often happens when you're hitting perimenopause and the menopause stages in life. So what they're using is a various different extract combination using concentrated cranberry with D-mannose and vitamin C, and it's very fast acting as a result. Now, that is a really useful product for anyone to have on their bathroom shelf, because often you will find that these urinary tract infections kind of come in and hit us at random moments in time, and they are extraordinarily painful. So you want to have something fast acting to ensure that we can sort them out. So if you're interested in any of these brilliant supplements, or specifically the UT Answer, then do please pop over to John Bell and Croydon, Whole Foods or bodykind.com and find out all about how their products can help you. So we've got to help it. And if you're somebody that's prone to sinusitis, or you're just somebody who's had a cold and it's all just got to get gumped up there, then you need to do the same thing. We've got to help the spleen, we've got to help the lungs, and we've got to basically deal with the manifestation of the symptom. So what do? Well, one of the first and easiest things that you can do, if you're whether you're somebody that deals with sinusitis on a regular basis, or you're just a cold sufferer and it's just happened to have got stuck in there, the first thing that I love to recommend is, well, I always like to start with the breath, because breath is the easiest modality to heal the body. It's the number one healing mechanism that the body does. Why? Because you breathe more frequently than anything else. You're breathing between 30 to 40,000 times a day, depending on who you are, which gives you a huge, great amount of opportunity to heal the body that way. So this is one of my all-time favorite healing tools, which is the Himalayan salt pipe. Okay, this is really cheap, it's really effective, and it really works. And there's so much information about, in fact, I've got a whole fact sheet on Himalayan salt bathing and halotherapy, which is what this is called, which basically in the East, we've been using these for thousands of years. In the West, it's slightly more recent, although you will find that using salt rooms for healing is very common in Eastern Europe. And one of the reasons why is because in Poland, interestingly, they have salt mines. They also have coal mines. And they noticed that the miners who were in the salt mines lived till, on the whole, ripe old ages. And whereas normally when you're working in coal mines, you tend to have a short lifespan. So they suddenly realized that it's because the people who were mining in the salt mines were breathing in salt fumes all day rather than carbon fumes all day. And of course, that was really health beneficial. So they did a whole load of research into it to discover that indeed breathing in salt is a really, really good way to dry up mucus. And all you do is it's got these little holes at the bottom, and this is where the salt crystals go in, and you just literally breathe slowly in and out like this. Like so. And what you're doing is you're drawing the salt and you're inhaling it. And what you're going to do is you're going to dry up all of this excess mucus in the lungs. It's also really good because it slows down the breath. And anyone that listens to me regularly, and if you don't, please go back a few episodes and have a good old listen. I talk about the importance of slow diaphragmatic breathing as one of the most important health hacks you can do. So if you're taking that on board, I would urge everybody to get themselves a Himalayan salt pipe so that you can slowly inhale salt at the same time. Because what you're doing is you're drying up the mucus so that the body doesn't have to send it upwards in an attempt to release it out through the nose. You're catching it before that's happened. So this is one of the easiest things that you can do to support your sinuses, okay? Now, if that's not enough and your sinuses are still getting the better of you, we need to go via the body. And this is why I talk about body gua sha. Now, body gua sha is one of the most brilliant self-care practices. And all you need to do is take the body gua sha tool, which for those who are listening only is like a sort of shape of a kidney. And it's like a silver tool that I'm holding here. And you put some oil on your chest when you're getting ready for bed at night. So I sort of, as usual, be, naked in your bathroom, sorting this stuff out. Put some oil over your chest and then press stroke away from the heart, all the way across the chest, starting from the heart, working outwards all the way to the arm socket, across like that. And for good measure, if you can, take it down the arm, aiming towards the thumb and index finger, okay? Because at that point, you're working across the metal element channels of the body, which are dealing with the lungs specifically, okay? So then you want to go down the throat using the earlobe as your point of reference, going down the throat, 6 sweeps downwards, and then these sweeps across the chest as well. Now that should also help dry up the mucus and get rid of any excess temperatures and just excess phlegm and damp and just excess toxicity, because it supports the circulatory function and allows the body to purge and nourish, which is what it's going to struggle to do if you've got symptoms of sinusitis. So those are some really easy techniques that you can do for yourself to deal with your sinusitis. Obviously, this is not an alternative to Western medical advice, but this is stuff that you can do as well as. If anyone has any comments or questions, do please leave them in the section below if you're on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or YouTube. And if you're on Spotify or Apple listening to this, do please forward this to your friends and family so that this information can be shared, because it's freely given. And all we want is to help you own your health as much as you possibly can. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time.